Viewer discretion is advised.
Nobody expected the moment that would come to define the morning. It began with a sound so subtle, viewers almost missed it. The faint hesitation in the applause, the tiny shift in energy that ripples through a room when something feels off. No alarms, no dramatic music, just a strange stillness wrapping itself around the studio seconds before the guest even spoke. Merciless. People would later argue about when exactly it started. Some would say it was the look in her eyes as she stepped into the light. Others would insist it was the way she paused before taking her seat, as if she were entering a courtroom rather than a cozy daytime set. But those closest to the moment swear it began the instant Meghan Markle caught sight of Lorraine Kelly waiting to greet her. Lorraine sat perched in her signature chair, shoulders relaxed, warmth radiating like a familiar morning sun. Years of professionalism had taught her how to read a room before the cameras ever rolled, and in that split second, something in Meghan's posture made her tilt her head just slightly. A tiny, instinctive recalibration. Meghan's heels clicked with a precision that felt deliberate, almost rehearsed, her expensive outfit shimmering under the studio lights. Someone in the audience whispered how stunning she looked, but even that admiration faded when she crossed the stage without waving, without acknowledging a single face behind the applause. Her steps carried the kind of confidence that didn't invite admiration. It demanded submission. Lorraine rose, extending her hand with the courtesy she had shown thousands of guests before. "It's lovely to have you with us today." Meghan's fingers touched hers for only a breath, a quick, cold handshake. Her reply was polite on paper, but empty in sound. "Thank you for having me." No smile, no warmth, just a soft statement laid flat on the studio floor. They both sat, and for a brief moment, Lorraine hoped things might settle into the familiar rhythm her audience loved. She started gently, easing into conversation with the calm tone she'd honed over decades. "You've had a very full schedule lately. I'd love to hear what you've been working on. Our viewers are always curious." Shifted back, crossing her legs with the confidence of someone who believed she'd earned her own orbit. When she spoke, her voice carried a subtle edge. Not loud, but sharp enough to leave a mark. "I've been focused on initiatives that actually matter," she said. "Substantial things, not just morning entertainment." The words weren't shouted, but the impact was instant. A tremor rolled through the space, tiny but unmistakable. Lorraine's smile dipped at the edges, a momentary flicker only the trained eye would catch. She tried again, gentle, steady. "Well, I'd love to hear about those meaningful projects. I think our viewers—" "You think they understand?" Meghan cut in, her head tilting just slightly, as if evaluating the room. "With all due respect, the kind of work I do isn't something everyone can grasp." The audience, usually lively by this point, went noticeably still. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Lorraine inhaled, slow and controlled. She'd handled difficult conversations before. She knew how to navigate egos. But this tone was unusual for a friendly morning program designed to make people feel heard, not dismissed. "I believe people understand more than they're given credit for," she replied. "Our viewers come from all walks of life." "Yes, but do they understand global impact?" Meghan interrupted again, the emphasis deliberate. "Do they understand what it takes to operate at a level where every decision carries international weight?" Shimmer the faces in the audience as if expecting them to agree. Instead, she found several stunned expressions staring back at her. Lorraine kept her voice calm, but the soft steel beneath it became visible for the first time. "I think our audience understands responsibility in many forms. Not all of them global, perhaps, but meaningful nonetheless." Meghan's lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm sure they're lovely people, but let's be honest. This is a morning talk show. It's not exactly the center of world affairs." Someone in the back row sucked in a breath, a small, sharp sound in an otherwise suffocating silence. Lorraine leaned forward ever so slightly. Not aggressive, just present. Every platform has value, she said. Every story matters, even the ones shared over morning tea. For a heartbeat, the studio felt suspended. It could have gone either way. A shift toward warmth, or an escalation into something far more volatile. Meghan chose escalation. Well, she said, brushing an invisible speck from her dress, some people contribute to the world on a level others simply can't comprehend. Not everyone is meant for the main stage. Their words hung there, heavy, arrogant, impossible to misinterpret. A dismissal gasp echoed across the room. Lorraine blinked once, slow and controlled, as if she were confirming to herself that she had heard correctly. The corners of her composure sharpened. "Are you suggesting," she asked quietly, "that people with ordinary jobs don't matter as much as those in the spotlight?" Meghan didn't even look apologetic. "I'm suggesting that some lives are simply smaller, and that's okay. Not everyone is extraordinary." This time, the shock wasn't silent. It rippled. Through the audience, through the crew, through the host sitting inches away. And for the first time in years on her own set, Lorraine felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Not anger, not indignation, but a quiet, simmering resolve. The kind that comes right before a line gets drawn. A line she was no longer willing to let anyone, royal or not, cross. For a few seconds, nobody knew what to do with the words that had just been spoken. It wasn't just arrogance, it was the casualness of it. The way Meghan delivered them like an undisputed truth, as if the studio, the viewers, the people working behind the scenes were all simply supporting characters in the grand script of her life. Lorraine didn't raise her voice. She never needed to. Even in the most complicated interviews of her career, she had always relied on steadiness rather than force. But today, as she looked at the woman sitting across from her, something in her finally shifted into place. "I have to ask," Lorraine said, her tone soft but unmistakably sharpened. "What do you think makes a life smaller?" Laugh was light, dismissive. "Lorraine, you're twisting this. I'm only stating a reality. When you live at a certain level, when your decisions affect millions, you can't relate to ordinary routines." In the audience muttered, "Wow." Someone else whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Felt her spine straighten. "You'd be surprised," she said carefully. "People watching this program know about pressure. They know about responsibility. They know about sacrifice." Meghan waved her hand, the gesture airy, bordering on careless. "But not the kind I'm talking about. Not the scrutiny, not the demands, not the constant global attention." "You think pressure only belongs to the famous?" Lorraine asked. "Think pressure belongs to people with real influence." Reply was as shocking as the message behind it. Lorraine held her gaze. "Influence comes in many forms." "Sure," Meghan said, leaning back. "But let's be honest. There's influence," she pointed to herself, "and then there's influence." She motioned vaguely toward the audience, the stage, the world outside the doors. "Not everyone can understand the life I live. Most people couldn't handle it." A few audience members shifted uncomfortably. The atmosphere was no longer just tense. It was bracing itself for something. Lorraine's voice softened in a way that was somehow even more powerful. "You may be surprised by what people handle every single day." Meghan blinked, almost confused by the pushback. "I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just stating that we operate on different levels." The room went utterly still. It wasn't an argument anymore. It was a worldview being cracked open in front of everyone's eyes. Lorraine leaned forward, her hands resting on her knees, her eyes locked on her guest. Different levels don't make anyone's life more valuable than another. Well, that's your philosophy. And what's yours? Lorraine asked. Paused as if genuinely considering. That some people are leaders, some people are observers. It's just the truth. The reaction was instant. A low rumble of disbelief rolled through the studio. Lorraine felt a warmth rise at the back of her neck, the kind that came not from anger, but from righteous conviction. Every person watching this show has a story that matters, she said quietly. Every family, every worker, every viewer who takes time out of their morning to join us, they watch you, Meghan interrupted, her tone almost pitying. They don't live what I live. For the briefest moment, Lorraine looked genuinely stunned. 12 years on her own show, thousands of interviews, countless difficult conversations, and she had never heard a guest dismiss an entire audience with such effortless condescension. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself. I think it's important, she said, not to mistake visibility for worth. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Are you going to preach now? It's not preaching, Lorraine replied. It's perspective. Meghan straightened her spine as if preparing for battle. You're making this sound like I've insulted people. Lorraine blinked. You don't think you have? I've said nothing untrue. Amber's murmur rolled through the audience like a gust of wind. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes darting between the two women, sensing that the interview had crossed a threshold it couldn't return from. Lorraine exhaled slowly. When she spoke, her voice carried a calmness that was more piercing than any shout. I think the truth you're describing is only true from where you're sitting. Spinal scoffed. And where I'm sitting happens to be on an international stage. Manslaughter Lorraine didn't look away. And where they're sitting, she gestured gently toward the audience, happens to be in the real world. A ripple of quiet appreciation moved through the room. Meghan's face hardened. So now you're attacking me. No, Lorraine said, her voice unwavering. I'm holding you accountable for your words. That's the same thing, Meghan snapped. It isn't, Lorraine replied, but accountability does tend to feel like an attack to those who are unused to it. Meghan froze. Meghan froze. Had landed. Perfectly. The crew exchanged glances. The audience inhaled collectively. A moment this sharp didn't happen often, not in controlled studios, not with famous guests, and certainly not on a show known for warmth rather than confrontation. Meghan's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate watching people be dismissed, Lorraine answered. Silence. The kind that demands attention. The kind that changes something in the air. Meghan leaned forward, her voice low. You're blowing this out of proportion. Met her tone with equal quiet. Am I? Meghan's eyes flashed. You're twisting everything for drama. And you're refusing to acknowledge how your words sounded. Meghan opened her mouth, ready with another retort, but something in Lorraine's expression stopped her. A steadiness. A certainty. A line drawn with calm, unwavering resolve. For the first time since she'd stepped into the studio, Meghan seemed rattled, not by the audience, not by the questions, but by the realization that she had met someone she couldn't bulldoze with status or attitude. They held its breath again. The balance had shifted, but the fallout was yet to come, and everyone could feel it. Subtly at first, then undeniably. Even those who had only come for a fun morning out could feel it settling into the air like a slow-moving storm. Until now, there had still been a chance for the interview to recover, for both women to reset, breathe, and redirect. But a single sentence, one delivered too confidently, too carelessly, wiped that possibility clean off the table. Meg exhaled sharply, the kind of breath people take when they believe they're surrounded by incompetence. Look, she said, straightening her expensive outfit. "I didn't come here to debate the value of people's lives. I came here to discuss serious issues." Lorraine's reaction was small but telling. Her eyebrows lifted just slightly, as if acknowledging the irony. "And you could," she replied calmly, "if you spoke about those issues without diminishing the people who support this very platform." Meg's lips pressed together. "You're making this personal." "It became personal," Lorraine said softly, "when you dismissed an entire audience as insignificant." Meghan laughed, short, sharp, humorless. "Do you honestly think I meant it like that?" "I think," Lorraine said gently, "that you meant it exactly like that. And perhaps you're only realizing the impact now." For a heartbeat, Meghan's expression wavered. Not remorse, irritation that her intent wasn't being granted immunity. "I deal with the harshest media on earth," Meghan fired back. "I've had my words twisted beyond recognition. I won't let you do the same." Lorraine's eyes didn't move away. "Your words haven't been twisted. They've been heard." The audience, Meghan brushed her hair back aggressively. "This is unbelievable. I come here out of kindness, out of courtesy, and I'm being portrayed as some sort of villain." Lorraine tilted her head. "All I'm doing is reflecting what you've said." "You're provoking me," Meghan snapped, "and you're escalating." Lorraine's voice didn't rise, but it grew firmer, anchored in quiet authority. Meghan's eyes narrowed. "You're trying to paint me as arrogant." Lorraine paused, not for dramatic effect, but for accuracy. "I'm not painting you as anything. You're revealing yourself." A wave of whispered "Oh my God" rolled across the studio. The sound of people witnessing something rare, a host refusing to bend, a guest refusing to soften, and a confrontation spiraling toward a point of no return. Meghan leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to cut through the air. "You don't understand what it's like to live under a microscope." "No," Lorraine conceded, "but I understand what it's like to be judged, to be questioned, to face pressure. We all do." "That's not the same," Meghan hissed. "It's more similar than you think," Lorraine replied. "Responsibility comes in many forms. Influence comes in many forms." Meghan scoffed. "Only one of us in this room understands global influence." The audience stiffened. Lorraine's tone cooled. "And only one of us believes that makes them superior." A sharp inhale from the front row. The tension was no longer simmering. It was seconds from boiling over. Meghan's hands curled into fists. "I don't need this." "Apparently," Lorraine said quietly, "you do." Meghan blinked hard. "Excuse me?" "You came onto this show expecting admiration," Lorraine continued, her voice as level as ever. "You expected to be celebrated. You expected the world to revolve around your narrative. But when accountability appeared, you pushed back." "That's not what's happening!" Meghan's voice cracked upward. "It's exactly what's happening," Lorraine answered. And then came the sentence, the one that would be replayed in slow motion by millions of viewers in the days to come. "You're not above the people who watch this show." A hush fell so deep it felt physical. Meghan's face twisted, not just in anger but in disbelief that anyone would dare speak to her like that. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded. But could even finish the breath behind those words, Lorraine responded, not louder, not harsher, but with such steady conviction that it silenced the room more effectively than any outburst could. "I know exactly who you are. And I also know who they are." Simmons motioned gently toward the audience. "And right now, Their dignity matters more than your ego. It was the turning point. The exact second when the interview stopped being a tense exchange and became something else entirely. Something irreversible. Meghan stared at her, stunned. A flush climbed up her neck. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. "I won't sit here and be patronized." "Are free to leave," Lorraine said. The sentence fell like a hammer. Shimmer surged through the audience. Shock, disbelief, a hint of awe. No one could remember a moment in daytime television quite like this. Simmons' breath grew fast and shallow. Her hands shook as she reached for the microphone clipped to her outfit. "You'll regret this," she spat, anger radiating off her in waves. Lorraine remained still, grounded, unshaken. "Respect isn't optional," she said simply. "Not here." Michelle yanked the mic pack off so abruptly the static popped through the speakers. A loud cracking thud echoed as it hit the table, scattered across the room like falling glass. She stood, abrupt, volatile, unsteady with rage, and grabbed her handbag with shaking hands. "I am done! This is beneath me!" The final word echoed like a slap. She turned, heels slamming against the studio floor, each step punctuating her exit. The entire audience held their breath, eyes fixed on her retreating figure. The door at the far end opened. A pause, chilled shut with a force that reverberated through the building. 7 passed. Crimson passed. And silenced. No one moved. No one spoke. It was the kind of silence only shock could create. Lorraine remained seated for a moment, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the door. A stillness settled over her, a quiet resolution. Not triumph, not satisfaction, but something more solemn. Jut know whether to cut the feed, reset the cameras, or simply wait. The audience clung to the silence, not wanting to break it, not daring to. And then, as if moved by some invisible signal, someone in the second row began to clap. Slow, hesitant, unsure if it was allowed. Another joined, then another. Then the entire studio rising to their feet in a wave of spontaneous support. The sound filled the room, powerful and raw. Lorraine blinked, the tension easing from her shoulders. She stood, taking in the faces around her. A sea of people who had just witnessed something no script, no rehearsal, no producer could have predicted. And for the first time since the interview began, a real smile formed. A storm had passed, but its aftermath had only begun. The applause that filled the studio wasn't the neat, polite kind daytime television usually heard. It was unrestrained, almost cathartic, rising from people who had just witnessed something raw, unscripted, and startlingly human. The sound rolled through the room like a wave, washing away the tension Meghan had left behind. In the center of it, the lights warming her face, her expression shifting from disbelief to gratitude, to something far deeper. She placed a hand over her heart, a small gesture, but it carried the weight of everything that had unfolded. When the applause finally settled into a long, soft hush, she drew a breath and spoke. Not for the cameras, not for the show, but for the people in that room who had stood by her. "Well," she said, her tone a mix of sincerity and wry humor, "that wasn't quite the conversation we planned for today." Laughter rippled through the audience, not mocking, but relieving, softening the edges of the moment. It felt like the room exhaled together, like a collective sigh of thank goodness someone said it. Lorraine sat back down, smoothing her skirt and taking a sip from her familiar mug. The comfort of that small routine steadied the atmosphere. She looked into the lens, into the eyes of viewers watching from living rooms, offices, kitchen tables, and something about her presence shifted. It was warm but firmer, gentler but unshakably certain. "You know," she said slowly, "I've always believed that respect is the foundation of conversation. Whether you're a celebrity or a student, a royal or a retiree, whether people know your name or not, you deserve to be treated as someone whose life matters." The audience listened in complete stillness. Even the crew had stopped moving, wires in hand, headsets lifted off one ear, as if the words themselves had gravity. "Today," she continued, "we heard something that didn't sit right. Something that suggested ordinary lives are somehow less meaningful. And that is something I cannot let pass." Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It simply carried a truth so steady that it felt like a hand placed gently but firmly on the world's shoulder. Every person watching this has struggles, responsibilities, quiet battles, quiet victories. And none of that makes your life smaller than someone else's. It makes your life real. Sam and a soft murmur of appreciation flowed from the seats. Lorraine smiled. Not the professional smile, not the cheerful presenter smile, but the kind that grows from conviction. I've met people on this show who've beaten impossible odds. Teachers who changed lives, nurses who saved them, parents who would give everything for their children, volunteers who work quietly without ever asking for recognition. These are not small lives. These are extraordinary, remarkable, meaningful lives. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And perhaps the people living them aren't always on magazine covers, but that doesn't make them any less significant. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. A man 2 rows behind her nodded slowly, his expression softening. Lorraine leaned back slightly, her voice warming once more. "So no, I won't apologize for challenging what was said. Because if we don't speak up for each other, then what are we doing?" For a studio was quiet, not tense, not shocked, just listening, breathing, absorbing. Then, gently at first, the applause rose again. But this time it wasn't loud, it thunderous. It was steady. Resolved. A kind of applause people give when they're moved, not entertained. Lorraine took a tiny bow of her head. She waited until the studio settled again. "Before turning back to the viewers at home," she said lightly, "we still have a show to finish, and I promise the next guest will not storm out." The room erupted in laughter, pure, grateful laughter. In the control rooms, scrambling through crisis mere minutes earlier, now found themselves smiling at each other, relief washing over them in waves. Someone muttered, "She handled that like royalty," and someone else replied, "Better." Within crew reset. Cameras tilted, microphones adjusted. Stage managers signaled countdowns. The rhythm of daytime television, the well-oiled machine, found itself again. But beneath that smooth functioning, something else lingered. A pulse. A memory. A moment of truth they all knew would live far beyond the studio walls. When the next guest walked out, a cheerful entrepreneur with a bright smile and a tray of colorful products, the audience greeted her with uproarious warmth. She laughed, slightly confused but delighted. "Oh my goodness!" she exclaimed. "Seems like I walked into quite the morning." Lorraine chuckled. "You have no idea." They dove into the segment and the show continued, as shows always do, gracefully, professionally, without a hint of the storm that had passed through the room. But something was undeniably different now. The energy, the unity, the sense that everyone, audience, crew, and host, had witnessed a boundary being drawn and defended. Throughout the remaining segments, Lorraine sprinkled small, meaningful glances toward the crowd. They responded with subtle nods, supportive smiles, the kind of rapport that isn't built in a day but revealed in a moment. Against every few minutes, the echo of what had happened resurfaced in small ways. A chef joking about high-maintenance guests. A designer, women who do everything. Blindness members laughing a little louder. And Lorraine Lorraine carried herself with a quiet radiance that only comes from standing firm when it mattered. When the final segment ended and the music faded, she thanked the viewers with genuine warmth. Not the rehearsed kind, the lived kind. "We appreciate you," she said, and she meant every syllable. The camera's red light blinked off. The broadcast ended. But the story? It was just beginning. When the red light finally switched off, the studio let out a breath it had been holding for nearly an hour. Crew members unclipped headsets. Audience members rose from their seats, still buzzing, still replaying the moment that had cracked the morning open. Lorraine stayed seated for a moment longer, letting the quiet settle around her. The set felt different now, not shaken, but steadied, like a ship that had sailed through rough waters and found its balance again. A producer hurried over, tablet in hand, eyes wide. "It's already everywhere," he said. "Clips, tweets, headlines. The reaction is massive." Lorraine didn't flinch. "Positive?" "Shattered." "Overwhelmingly," he smiled. "People say you said what they've wanted someone to say for years." She nodded, absorbing that. "I didn't do it for applause." "I know," he replied. "That's why it landed." As the audience filed out, still talking in animated half-whispers, several paused to wave at her. A few gave small salutes. One woman simply placed a hand on her heart as she exited. Lorraine returned the gesture with a soft smile. In the hallway, crew members gave her quiet thumbs up. The makeup artist squeezed her arm. Someone from wardrobe mouthed, "Thank you." Inside her dressing room, with the door finally closed, the noise of the studio melted into a faint hum. Lorraine sat down, noticing her reflection in the mirror. Tired, yes, but resolute. Strong in a way that didn't require volume. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from colleagues, old friends, fellow presenters, even a respected journalist she admired deeply. "You reminded people that kindness has a spine," one message read. Another simply said, "Proud of you." Lorraine set the phone down, letting the words sink into the quiet. What happened on that stage wasn't planned. It wasn't polished or packaged. It was messy, real, uncomfortable, and honest. And as she gathered her things and prepared to leave the studio, she realized something simple yet powerful. With sometimes, the most extraordinary moments happen when someone finally decides that enough is enough. When someone chooses dignity over silence. When someone refuses to let arrogance go unchallenged. She walked out of the studio into the cool afternoon air, the city humming as it always did. Tomorrow there would be another show, another guest, another conversation. But today? To rated reliability during millions watching that ordinary people are never small. And that truth, quiet, steady, and unshakable, was going to echo far beyond the walls of any studio.